Great. Well, we're live. Welcome to episode number 2. This time I'm talking to Brittny Smith. Brittny's a friend of mine. She's a mom. She has an interior design business that's doing awesome work, and you guys can find them. We'll have to tell your Instagram handle for anybody that's watching. Also, a photographer. There's like a billion things that Brittny is. Used to work for Walmart. Is that right? We should probably get into some of your story.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but thanks for being here, Brittny. This is awesome.
Thanks. And thanks for having me.
You're my first official guest. Congratulations.
But it's your second episode, right?
Yeah, I did one that was just me ranting. So now we're
Nice.
on to a second episode. And the goal of the show really is to just dig into people's stories that love learning. And you totally stand out as somebody that loves learning. So why don't you just kind of like introduce yourself? You can tell a little bit about your story. I'd be curious, as you think about your background, you've talked to me about some of the things you've taught yourself as an adult, but like, was that always true for you? And kind of going back in your life, like thinking about where that love of learning started?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot with my kids lately because, how do I motivate my kids now that I'm teaching them in the home right now and getting them to be self-motivated to want to get on and learn for themselves, and like how important that is. It's super important to teach that. And I do not espouse to know how to teach that, but I have always loved learning. I've always loved going to school. I always loved having a neat and tidy desk, and I sat there and I loved learning. And I liked, I was always a pretty good student. I wasn't always the best, but I was always, maybe in the top 10 or 15% of my class. And so I enjoyed pleasing and I enjoyed doing well. And and I always enjoyed taking new classes. Like in high school, I'd never taken art classes before. I've always liked art at home as a child, but took my first art class in high school. And, I did take an art class in middle school too, where we learned how to weave baskets and to do different cool art projects. And those are some of my favorite things that stand out to me that I learned as a kid that have stayed with me as an adult.
Some people get to they finish college or something. They have this moment where it's like, okay, now learning is over and now it's time to just start working or whatever else happens. It seems like you just never had that moment. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely slows down when you have kids. It feels a little bit monumental to try to take on learning something new, but
well, you're learning different things by having kids. Yeah.
But I remember when McKenna was born, I asked Cameron to buy me a camera for when she was born. I was like, I want to capture all these beautiful moments with her. And then, I would take photos and I'd be like, okay, well, my photos don't look like these photos. Like, what do I need to do to get my photography to the next level? And then, lots of reading, lots of researching, lots and lots of practice led me to, figure out how to become a professional over the last 10 years. And then learning photography and wanting to hone those skills led me to needing to learn other things like Photoshop became super important. And now that I'm working on interior design, that I've had to learn even more new photography skills, because photographing interiors and landscapes is different than photographing people, and you have to learn to manipulate the photos even differently. So I feel like you're right. Like, learning is a lifelong endeavor. And then I learned how to I taught myself how to sew when my kids were when they were small, because I was looking for pillows for my living room. Usually learning something is like solving a problem for me. So I couldn't find any pillows that I liked for my living room. And so I was like, okay, well, I really like this fabric. I'm sure it can't be too hard to learn how to sew. I mean, lots of people can sew. And it was a learning curve. Like, it took a little bit of, it took a couple days and a lot of mistakes, but I eventually sewed, 12 pillows, and then I sewed blankets, and it just kind of evolved from there.
That's so awesome. So I want to drill into a couple things. One, just point out what you said, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in this. Like, learning for you starts with solving a problem. You're just like, this needs to be I need this thing. I can't find it. I can't do it, whatever, I'm going to just figure it out. Like, I'm going to learn how to do it. That's really cool. Let's drill into this Photoshop, because I think that's interesting, right? You've got this, you start out just as like a mom photographing your own child. You start doing a little bit more work. You're like finding yourself interested in it. You're experimenting, you know, probably a lot of trial and error. At some point you get to like Photoshop, which, you know, I've tried to use Photoshop. There's like a million features. I just end up crying and like turning it off. How did you take that on? Like you knew Photoshop was going to be part of like leveling up as a photographer. Did you like sign up for some sort of course? Did you find something online? What was your strategy with that?
Well, it all learning to me feels like it's a process. So first, I didn't start off in Photoshop. I started off with, it was called it was like Photoshop Lite or something. It came out right about in like 2009, 2010 when McKenna was born. And it was like Photoshop, but for babies who don't know anything about Photoshop.
I think I've used it. That was like perfect for me, actually.
Yeah, and it did. I mean, it helped you learn some basics like that you need for photography, like adjusting exposure and white balance and things like that. But you couldn't do really complicated things. But then I found like, you know, that it was limited in some way. So then I was like, after a couple years, I mean, I worked in that program for years until we lived in Michigan, and I wanted to do more complicated things, or I felt like it was limiting me in some ways. And so I upgraded to Photoshop while Cameron was in grad school. And then you know, I thought, you know, as a learner too, I discovered like, sometimes I thought, well, it must be my photography is not up to par. I need to work more on my photography. And other times it was like, no, Photoshop's really holding me back. I need to work more in Photoshop. And so those two components, working the camera and working Photoshop, both were kind of, I had to keep working on them at the same time. And then my photography skills kept improving.
Oh, that's cool.
With that learning.
So did it ever feel like overwhelming? Like I'm trying to boil the ocean or trying to like eat the whole elephant? Or was it just sort of like, I want to do this one thing. I'm going to figure out how to do this one thing.
Usually it's in really bite-sized increments. Like something that I have been working on recently is newborn photography in my studio. So I started, you know, it's like a process. So eventually I was like, oh, I really want to do studio photography. So I bought lights and equipment, and I had to teach myself how to use all that equipment. And then once I have these beautiful photos of these newborns, I'm running into other problems like, oh, how do I make the blanket look perfectly smooth like some of my inspiration photos? And so then you look up blanket smoothing tutorial on.
Wait, that's literally what you Googled?
Yeah.
You Googled blanket smoothing tutorial.
Yeah, newborn blanket smoothing tutorial. And then I watch lots of, you know, Cameron's like, go to bed, Brittny. And I'm like, I'm learning how to smooth blankets in Photoshop.
Like, Cameron, I'm a learner. What am I going to do? Cameron, by the way, if you don't know Brittny, it's her husband, and he's awesome. He's also awesome. A learner.
He is.
That's so funny. So, I mean, I've said this to people before. Like, they'll ask me, like, how do you guys do curriculum, and how do you think about like the content side of designing school? Like, that can feel stressful to people. But in some ways, that's true. But in another way, it's like, actually, I think it's been true for a while that anybody who wants to learn anything can find it on the internet. You know, it's like, just as long as you know, you have a web connection and you know kind of how to use Google, you can basically teach yourself lots of stuff. I didn't realize that.
I think it's come a long way, though. I'll say when I first started in photography, it was not easy to find people.
That's interesting.
People weren't always willing to share their knowledge. They wanted to make money from that. That makes sense. So when I first started, it was really hard to find the knowledge online. I bought some books, but they were kind of cryptic, and I was like, well, but how, you know, it was hard. A book can't tell you how to problem solve. You know, issues you're experiencing in your photography or whatever it is that you're working on. So I would seek out experts too. So like I knew somebody from church who did photography, and I was like, I'm really stuck on this one thing. I need your help to get over this hump. And then you figure out, well, I need to search for this learning online, and then maybe those tutorials will open up more doors for me.
So interesting. So it's basically like, there's a first like limitation is like a mindset. You clearly had it, right? It's just like, I'm just going to learn this, whatever that means. And then the second thing is like, I need content. Like I need something that can teach me this. And so you start Googling, but that's an interesting point that the internet wasn't as free of a place even, 10 years ago as it is now, where I've seen that in entrepreneurship too. So, I mean, really good advice now exists for free on the internet for how to run a company.
Right.
But I don't think that used to be the case. It was this domain of, big shots, right? Like
Right.
you had to be this like Wall Street expert or Silicon Valley, whatever. And now you can just search for stuff and find really good answers and get access to people. I think your next point though is really interesting too, which is you found somebody that you could ask questions. Did that show up as a pattern? Like, did that come up in sewing and interior design as you learned those skills?
Yeah, it would. Like I would, if I couldn't figure out how, yes, exactly. In sewing. So I have an example for that. I could not figure out how to thread the needle of my sewing machine. And so it took my mother-in-law coming over and helping me. She's an experienced sewer. She was like, here, I'll show you how to do it on mine. And then we worked on mine together with the manual and we figured out how to do it.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. Usually it does help to have somebody that you can turn to. And like our mutual friend, Allison, I think it's been really inspiring to see her go to people and ask for expertise as she's building her company and trying to figure out how to, how to use Instagram or how to use YouTube or Facebook or whatever it is that she's doing. So
totally. And she's learning like a boss. We got to get her on here too.
Oh, she'd be great. You got to get her.
So interesting. Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed with kids, and I think adults do this probably even more, is like they'll run into this moment where it's like they want to learn something because like they want to solve a problem, right? Like I want to be able to do this thing or I want to like turn this, create this project or whatever. They run into this moment where it's like, I don't know that. Like they can see the thing ahead of them that they don't know. Mm-hmm. And like there can be like a crushing like psychological blow to that. Like have you ever experienced that, or is it something that you have like any guidance for people that like see that? Basically it's just the unpleasantness of like, here's a thing that I don't know and I don't like how that feels, right? It's like it's like an uncomfortable moment.
Well, I've run into that with my career now, is that I feel like to grow and to be successful that I really need to be more vulnerable in a public space and like take on hard things, and like because people really relate to that when they're designing their homes or they're trying to make their spaces beautiful.
Yeah,
most people want to try to learn how to do it on their own because they can't afford to hire somebody, or just because it feels more satisfying to do it on your own. And so so I've been thinking like I really would love to tackle some big home projects on my own, but it feels a little daunting, like with 4 kids, and Cameron has a really demanding job. And so it feels like, okay, it's going to take a lot of preparation and then a lot of research before I feel like I can get started. So I haven't started learning those new things, like how to cut wood at angles and, do woodworking in my house, because I'm like it's going to put our house in a total disarray. It's going to be chaos. My kids could like hurt themselves on this heavy equipment. So I mean, there are always going to be roadblocks. And I think it's just like, how do you get over that? You just have to maybe plan, maybe study, and then you just got to cut the cord and go.
I feel like when did you guys move to Mesa, Arizona? It was not that long ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. So when you came here, you don't have to share too much about this, but you didn't already have an interior design like business or even like a background, right?
No,
so
I've always liked beautiful.
You were interested in it. It was like an interest.
Yeah, it was just an interest, like as a teenager or even in middle school or as in elementary school, I'd like glue stickers on my bed because I thought it looked too kiddie, and I would make it look different, and I would pick out, bedspreads.
So you've been like artistic / designy for forever, but like to actually do this, I mean, there's like all kinds of, I could imagine people watching this being like, how in the world would you even, and you guys bought this house and you did the design yourself? Did you like just with the help of Google and asking questions, you taught yourself interior design?
Yeah, I mean, it really does take people, a little bit of bravery to take on something you've never done, but
Yeah.
it takes depending on people who are, number one, willing to give you their expertise and knowledge. Like I did not do everything on my own. Relied on experts. I relied on my real estate agent who was well connected in the community.
Yeah.
He shared his subcontractors that he trusted with me.
Okay.
Huge thing. And then those subcontractors, they brought their own wealth of knowledge to the project. And then I had one other general contractor who would do all the other little things that the subs didn't know. And
Hmm.
many mistakes were had because I was a beginner. I didn't know, like, oh, you need to use pre-sealed grout when you're tiling your bathroom floor. And so now I have bathroom tile that doesn't have pre-sealed grout, and I have to go back and seal it myself. So I've learned a lot in the last year, but yeah, I just used Google. I use the experts around me, and I guess you have to say I kind of believed that I could do it. I felt like I could do it. So
Not kind of. I mean, you did believe. And the cool thing is like you've proven that over and over again in your life, like to yourself. So whether or not you had a question about it at some point in the past, it sounds like maybe you just never did. You've just always been this type of person. But like for sure by now, it's like everything you've encountered, like I want to learn that. All right, like I'm just going to learn it. And you accept all of the pain that goes with that process, right?
yeah, sure.
I think what's interesting about this, and this is maybe the kind of closing argument for why you should care about learning is like, can you talk a little bit about your business now? I mean, people are like paying you to design stuff for them. Like from
Yeah.
2 years ago, like Googling stuff, doing it on your own, kind of stumbling through your own house, to like you and Brienne have like a business and you
Yeah.
guys like charge people, right? I mean, so to me,
Yeah.
that's like incredible. And I think a lot of people would say that's like a dream come true, but they would put it in a different category of like, that's for people that, name the thing, right? Like went to school for this, have experience with this, whatever. And you're like a counter example to that. It's like you moved here 2 years ago, did not have that experience. And now you're like a professional interior designer.
I think anybody who's ever been successful will tell you that it's not luck ever. It's about your determination to try new things and then to work really hard learning and to just do things. And if
Yeah.
you don't know how to do it, you like figure out how to do. So if somebody out there has the answers to the questions you may have that might be holding you back. So like right now, yes, I've been building up my portfolio for the last year, working on we've done probably 10 huge remodels in the last year. And like I said, I've leaned heavily on experts, and then I've leaned heavily on my own interests and experience in
Yeah.
design. I have a marketing background. I don't have a design background, but I've always had a creative background, and I've leaned heavily on that in the last year also. And I encounter new challenges every day. Like right now, it's like, where is my business going? Like, where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 2 years?
Right.
And managing all of that with my family, I still have really young kids right now. I have a 3 and 5-year-old, are my youngest. And so I'm relying on Cameron to help me know, like, what is the best direction? How am I going to be able to actually make really good money at this someday?
Yeah.
I'm right now I'm kind of in an apprenticeship, I would say. Like, I'm not making a ton of money right now because I know that I have to pay my dues, right, before I can make a ton of money. And
Totally.
so that's why I'm like, there are trade-offs. Not making a ton of money, but I'm getting a lot of great photos, and I'm building a website, and I'm gaining all this experience so that in the future I can hopefully have a career from this.
Awesome. Yeah, I wish I could grab some of these kids like by the shirt and just say, like, you don't need a career right now. Like all you have is learning. Like that you have this whole window. And even especially now, like kids are home from school, this could be one of those moments for them where it's like, what do I want to do? And I hope there's kids that will watch this and say, I want to go to Mars. Like literally that's what I want to do. And then just start like just like what you did for sewing pillows and interior design and photography. Like there's nothing magical about that, You know, there's definitely like science and engineering that needs to be solved, but you can learn it. Like that's the whole point about being human.
I mean, I'm 36 and I'm thinking, you know, and I had a career before I got married and had kids in marketing, like I said. But you know, it's never too late to totally just dream big. So I'm thinking future, like maybe I want to become an architect. Maybe I want to become a general contractor. And, you know, the sky's the limit. You're never too old to do that. I'm going to live until I'm hopefully 80. I've got more than half of my life left to become and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think you just have to set your mind to it.
There's so much power in that. I hope people are like watching this and feeling that, because it's true. And imagine a whole world full of people that see things this way. Like I can just do whatever I want to do. I just have to learn it. And it's totally fine that I don't know it. And I totally expect bumps along the way. Yeah. Brittny, this has been so fascinating. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Of course.